project is going to be a honey pot. Now, we're going to make the honey pot shape, but we're not going to do the lid yet because, well, that will be for a future lesson. So again, I have 1 pound of thoroughly wedged clay, and I'm going to attach it to my clean dry bat. There's a little bit of haze on this bat, but it's fine. It doesn't have chunks of anything on it. So it's good to go. So while I'm centering, I'm not going to just describe everything I'm doing because we've been through that enough times. But I will say a little bit about the honey pot shape. So with the honey pot, you have 3 directional changes. I guess I should get one and put in front of us. That would be probably very helpful at this point. So that's a honey pot shape. So what you can see is that it goes out, and then it comes back in, and then it goes out again. So that's the basic shape. You know, you can imagine something that actually holds honey and would typically have a lid. But again, we're just doing the basic shape as an exercise. So that's 2 times up and down with the centering motion. As I say, normally you can get it pretty well centered with 3 times up and down, but that is just a rule of thumb, and my advice is continue doing the centering until it feels pretty perfect to you. You want it to be really well centered. I've got this centered. I'm going to just clean up that little slop on the wheel head, and then we'll go ahead and open. Nothing new under the sun here today, not yet anyway. So we go down to our traditional about 1/4 inch bottom. I'm opening a little bit differently this time, just for fun. Sometimes I like to do that. I just drag my thumb behind my index finger, and that makes a nice flat bottom. Any way that you choose to do that is fine. There's probably as many ways of doing these things as there are potters. So since I'm having an upward oriented shape, I'm going to go ahead and pull this back. And so now I have the inward conical shape. And from there, always go back and compress the lip. I can't say that too many times. That is a standard part of making every pot. A couple of drops of water on there, and we're just going to go ahead with a pull. For this particular shape, I am, right now, all I'm trying to do is make the nicest cylinder that I can. So that was actually a pretty good pull. Go back and smooth out and compress that lip. Clean things up a little bit. There's a few drops of water down there, so I will mop that up, and we're just going to add some back. When we add the water back, it's going on the top and kind of running down. So we're trying to keep it dry down low and moist enough everywhere so that we can stretch the clay without it sticking. Okay, pretty much straight up so far. Now, in the earlier exercises, we were trying to get a 4-inch cylinder with 1 pound of clay. Looks to me like we're already at 4 1/4, so that's a pretty good achievement. However, with this particular lump of clay, I feel like I can probably do 1 more pull, and that the thickness will be more to my liking. So I'm going to go ahead and do a 4th pull. Again, there are no rules, no hard and fast rules, just kind of rules of thumb as guides. Okay, so now I've got a nice tall cylinder. It's wobbling a little bit, but you know, it does that sometimes. Right. Now, in the last demonstration I did, I neglected to do that pre-trim step. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. And again, you're just trying to cut off some of that excess ragged looking clay and make it nicer looking, in case, you know, some people, that's all the trimming they ever do. They never go back and do a formal trimming. And I'm going to do demonstrations of different ways of finishing the bottoms of your pots. So that's trimming or otherwise finishing the bottoms, always a good thing. Okay, now this looks nothing like a honey pot. It's really just a cylinder. So the next thing I want to do is I want to stretch the walls, because like I said, with this honey pot shape, you want to go out first and then you want to come in. So I think we can achieve a lot of that simply by taking some kind of a tool and stretching the walls. Now, you know, this can actually be done just with a sponge. So I kind of like the idea of using as few tools as possible. So let me demonstrate now stretching with a sponge. So my sponge was just wetted and wrung out, so it's damp. The kind of sponge I would use to sop up that little bit of water that's in the bottom of the pot. There's really not much down there. But I want to stretch the walls, and I can stretch the walls with my fingers, with a sponge, or with a rib, and I've got some pretty fancy ribs, but let's just do it with a sponge. So with a stretch, I want to think about the shape that I'm trying to achieve, and so I want to push out the clay at somewhere a little bit below the halfway point here. I want that to be the furthest out part. So that means I'm going to start at about that halfway point. I'm going to get the wheel spinning and I'm going to hold that sponge in place. Now this is very difficult to see from this camera angle, but I'll hold the sponge here and show that what I'm going to do is kind of rock it in my fingers toward the outside wall, or just toward me. And when I do that, you're going to see the outside of the pot is going to stretch a little bit. And you can see that now. And I'm going to stretch in a downward motion. When you stretch a pot, if you do it pushing your rib or your sponge down, the pot won't shrink. If you do that pulling up, the pot height will get a little bit shorter, and you don't usually want it to get shorter. So you typically will rib or stretch from the top down. Now I want to stretch it a little bit more. So it looks to me like I can start a little bit higher with the stretch, and I just want to push that out a little bit and then push it down, just trying to form that belly shape. Now I am going to pull back up with the sponge. It's okay to do, but it does sometimes shorten your pot. Now I want to make sure that I bring my shoulder up enough. You can end up with some unusual shapes doing this kind of motion. Now I've got a nice belly on it, but I need the lip to go out a little bit. You can see how that has a lip that flares. So now I'm just going to hold the middle finger on my left hand on the inside of the rim, and I'm holding my damp sponge where I want the inside of the curve to be. So I'm just going to hold the sponge and compress it a little bit, and I'm pulling out with my top finger to stretch that the lip outward. Now on a real honey pot with a lid, you're going to want a gallery. That is a ledge that goes around the inside of this surface that you can set a lid on. Again, we're not going to make the lid, but why not make the pot look as convincing as we can? So I can see that this shape can stand to have a little bit more extreme of the lip. So we're going to push that just a little bit further out. And you can start to bring other fingers and fingernails and stuff into play. So I really want to form a gallery or a ledge right here. So I'm just using the back of my thumbnail to form a little ledge. Now you can use tools. You could use the back of the wooden knife, has an almost fingernail shaped surface, and that also works very nicely for forming this gallery. Whatever tool you want to use, typically start with your hands, and if you can't figure out how to do it with your hands, bring the simplest tool to the party next, and that would be the sponge. And then after that, it's kind of anything goes. You can use any tool or anything you want as a tool. But now that's the basic honey pot shape, and we indeed could make a lid for it, but like I said, we're just trying to get the shape at this point. So, and this comes off of the wheel in the same way, so I'll just get a little bit of water there and take my wire and run that under. And there we go. And that can go on my back with my other pots that I'm making today. And we'll be, with these pots that I'm making and setting off to the side, what we're going to do with those is we're going to trim them later. But as we've discussed the stages of clay, the clay, when we're working with it on the wheel, is in the plastic state. It's going to dry down, and the next major state that it gets into is what we call the leather hard state. And that's when we want to do our final shaping with trimming tools, where we can just cut and the clay will come off in clean peels so that we can achieve a fine tuning of the shape. So that is the honey pot, and thanks for watching.